When most of you hear the name Bismarck, you tend to think of this. Or perhaps I speak out of turn, and the only one you're familiar with is this. And that he's just Square Enix's appropriation of this guy. Or should I say Circle Enix? Anyway, Bismarck's namesake is given precious little attention within the few games in the series he does appear in, and the Final Fantasy Wiki will only concede that the German battleship Bismarck is a famous Second World War battleship named after the German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck. Old mate Otto does have precious little to do with a Leviathan in the classical sense, which is really all that Bismarck is through most of the Final Fantasy universe. He lends much from the battleship and apparently nothing from the man. But then there's this, from the Final Fantasy XIII Datalogue. An aquatic fal'Cie, Bismarck dwells within the watery refuge of Gran Pulse's Sulia Springs. Wary and cunning, the whale-like creature vehemently defends its territory, employing various indirect means to eliminate trespassers. Bismarck's duty appears to be the slow and painstaking reshaping of the land through water erosion. This is likely the reason for its aggressive defense of the waters it inhabits. And you know what, reading this made me think, although he's not directly confronted, Final Fantasy XIII establishes Bismarck as a kind of conservative, territory consolidating as opposed to expanding, and a force that reshapes the landscape slowly and painstakingly for some purpose that it considers a duty. Wary and indirect are not attributes of a monolithic battleship by any stretch. And that leads us back to Otto von Bismarck, a 19th century champion of the contemporary Wagnerian ideal, unifier of the Prussian principalities into a strong conservative German empire with himself as chancellor under Wilhelm I, consolidating German hegemony in Europe not through conquest, but through sort of multilateral diplomacy and trade and the deliberate Germanization of the empire's national minorities, particularly those of French, Danish, Polish ethnicity. The few wars that he did conduct were short, measured, and brutally decisive, born of a pragmatic desire to keep France from pushing at the Prussian states. Pragmatism which certainly seems to die with him before the dawn of the 20th century. In short, Bismarck was a juggernaut of revolutionary conservatism. The Bismarck described in Final Fantasy XIII appeals readily to these qualities: wary, indirect, defensive, dutiful, particularly painstakingly reshaping the land. That's surely not a casual throwaway comment. It might be a stretch, but this implies to me that his next iteration may well also have some real depth, and that there is actually a precedent for his character to be directly informed by his namesake, Otto von Bismarck. With that in mind, let's have a brief look at what we know about Final Fantasy's Bismarck, Heavensward, and the Vanu, and see what sort of story clues or story opportunities, I should say, we can extract. Given Bismarck's reimagining as a kind of giant feathered sky whale, we can fairly safely speculate that his client beast race, the Vanu, are settled among the floating land masses of what I'm expecting to be, or at least include the continent Ayatlan of Ixali myth. Since most of these islands appear to be, if not small, then certainly not massive, the Vanu tribes will likely be split between multiple islands, sharing a single cultural identity and geographically close, but still very much fractured and isolated, much like the Prussian states prior to 1848. The Ishgardians and Eorzean Grand Companies will begin in Heavensward to explore this region for whatever reasons, and subsequently annexing territory close to that of the Vanu. Now you might be thinking that the circumstances of the Vanu will be the same as that of the Eorzean beastmen. Their aggression towards the Eorzean states, particularly in the case of the Sahagan, the Sylphs, the Ixali, the Kobolds, it's all been primarily motivated by territory. So why is this case any different with the Vanu? Well, firstly, while each of the beast tribes in A Realm Reborn have had beefs with the city-states of Eorzea, their territory has not been concurrently contested by other beast tribes. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I do not recall even an implication of an Amal-Jar raiding Ixali's strongholds or any other conflict between two different beast races. And this is easily explained by the fact that they're all very spread out. Plenty of space and masses of resources in between, occupying different regions of Eorzea entirely. On the other hand, we know already that the region of or around Ayatlan consists of isolated landmasses that each have reasonably limited resources and are very close together, close enough to be in eyesight. We know that the Vanu Vanu do not occupy this region uncontested. Before our arrival, they already have had both the dragons and the Nath to contend with. The former we know well by now to be extremely hostile to pretty much everyone, and the latter have been implied to be a warlike species, worshipping a big mean bastard that frankly looks like the love child of General Grievous and the antagonist from Bug's Life. I think it was James Wood. Fun fact anyway, James Wood was actually in the Final Fantasy film, Spirits Within. There's some James Wood trivia for you. I should probably change the title of the video. Anyway, any one of these land masses that is already occupied by one beast tribe will almost certainly not have enough space for some peaceful neighbors of another. And so we can imagine that two different tribes could literally be staring each other down from different islands, only a few hundred feet apart, but without being able to physically reach each other. Which would be a disconcerting feeling for both involved. They're already going to be on edge. So we've established that the Vanu Vanu were likely spread between islands, that is to say decentralized, and already very wary of encroachment by other beasties. I suspect that once the grand companies of Eorzea take to the skies, this may motivate each of the Vanu Vanu holdings to unify, centralize, and summon the great conservative Otto in order to consolidate their territory without immediately resorting to a full-blown conflict that would force them to expose a weaker front to the Nath or the dragons that would want to move in. If we do end up going to war with the Vanu Vanu, I imagine that it will destabilize a tentative balance and result in a free-for-all between the Eorzean states, the Vanu Vanu, the Nath, and the dragons, which I personally think would be a pretty awesome direction for the story to move in. I suspect that they will, however, first attempt to parley with the Eorzean states, limit their annexation, and perhaps even establish trade with them. Whether Bismarck will be contested with before this relationship is established or subsequent to its failure, I can't say. But if Square Enix does, as I suspect, draw some inspiration from the real namesake of Bismarck in order to inform the politics of this new area and give a real depth to this character that some of the earlier primals in particular have been lacking, it would be a rich and promising start to the story for Heavensward. I could of course be massively overstating the importance of Bismarck, the Vanu Vanu, and the Nath, the progression of Heavensward's story. That's fine, this is just some fun speculation, and I'd love to know what you all think, agree, disagree, your own theories, whatever. Anyways, thanks for listening everyone. Please take 3 seconds to comment, like, or sub if you'd like to see more content like this. I'm experimenting with different kinds of videos at the moment, but I imagine I'll fall into some kind of rhythm soon. In any case, I think it's fun to give Final Fantasy XIV the sort of academic treatment in moderation. There's a fine line between speculating and just talking shit, and I suppose I could be on either side of that line. But I'll happily publish more like this if there's an audience for it. So click the things, check out my channel, whatever. I've been Ethos. It's only 20 malms to Ayatlan, and I will see you there.